Hi BookTube, it's Amy, and I'm back reading from the Anatomy of Bibliomania by Holbrook Jackson. We're on page 241 today with a section titled Various Readers and Their Reading Places. Happy the bookman who can read anywhere, secure in his book from all common annoyances. The tumult of traffic in cities, noises of trains, omnibuses, aeroplanes, automobiles, motorcycles, and mnemonic road drills with their vibrant oscillations. But not all can train themselves to endure such inconveniences. Some cannot read in public or amidst noise, and who does not prefer quietude? The love of learning, the sequestered nooks, and all the sweet serenity of books. Our footnote pointing us to some lines by Longfellow. Books are born of the very sigh that silence heaves. They are the voice of silence and quiet time, the colonizers of solitude. True reading demands seclusion, leisure, freedom from the crowd. What is gregarious is foreign to it. To walk or loaf with a book among orchards, gardens, bowers, parks, and arbors, artificial wildernesses is most sweet, or in wild places, green thickets, copses, oases in the desert, lawns with rivulets, fountains, and such like pleasant places as Antican Daphne, so deeply bosomed in a thick grove of laurels and cypresses that is formed in the most sultry summers a cool and penetrable shade, where 1,000 streams of the purest water, issuing from every hill, preserved the verdure of the earth and the temperature of the air, where the senses were gratified with harmonious sounds and aromatic odors, and the peaceful grove was consecrated to health and joy, to luxury and love, or those quinsical or other geometrical or reticulated gardens of the ancients, so enviously dilated upon by Sir Thomas Browne in his Garden of Cyrus, or that garden at Athens where Epicurus passed his whole life studying and teaching philosophy, in comparison with which no other abode seems to contribute so much to both the tranquillity of mind and indolence of body, which he made his chief end. It is a delectable recreation, for how much better one's books read in country stillness than amid the noise of wheels, crowds, etc. But we need not seek out such pleasant delights in ancient times or distant places, for in our own age, in our own dear England, they have been tasted and still are. I should like very well to be shut up in a garden for the whole summer with no literature but the Fairy Queen, says Hamerton, and once he nearly realized that project, but publishers and postmen interfered with it. Many of the most fortunate of bookmen have rich memories of Christ Church meadows in Oxford, and those adorable backs of Cambridge, where Arthur, Alfred, Fitz, and Brooks lit thoughts of one another's looks, embraced their jests, and kicked their books in England's happier times. Our footnote pointing to William Corey's Ionica. Loving them and reading them nonetheless, as in well-known, and I do not find a more pleasant environment for reading than such places, soberly and opportunely used. But when all is said, it is the greatest of good fortune to be able to defy the world and retreat into a book at any time or place. Many bookmen have done so, and still do, by reason of that detachment which, properly disposed to all good books, engender. It is the very same faculty which enabled John Wellesley to read through Martin Luther's comment on the Epistle to the Galatians and the 10th Iliad of Homer, and many other profound works, on horseback during his great mission of evangelization, having other employments at other times. How is it, he asks, that no horse ever stumbles while I am reading? Because, he answers, when reading, 'tis his custom to throw his rein on the horse's neck, and in riding above 100 miles he scarce ever remembers any horse, except 2, that would fall head over heels anyway, to fall or make a considerable stumble where he rode with a slack rein. This I record, by the way, for the benefit of those about to follow his example. For farther evidence of such feats, take that of Colonel Lawrence riding across the Arabian desert on a camel, at the head of his Bedouins reading Aristophanes in the original when there was nothing else to be done. So sensitive a poet as Petrarch could read in all circumstances, whether I am being shaved or having my hair cut, whether I am riding on horseback or taking my meals. I either read myself or get someone to read to me. And on the table where he dined, and by the side of his bed, he kept all the materials for writing, out of an instinctive desire to lose no chance of adding to the world's store of delectable books. His favorite, the Confessions of St. Augustine, accompanied him everywhere, even on the adventure when he and his brother climbed Mount Verneau, or rather Mount Ventoux, I think, is how it's pronounced there. Our footnote pointing to Tantum's Francesco Petrarca. Because he was so great a reader, Sidney Smith called Macaulay a book in breeches. He read anything and remembered everything, no place or time inappropriate for the practice of his bookishness. He would read the classics while walking, Plato on the heath at Tunbridge, Plantus in the thickets at Bonchurch, sitting down here and there to read the Paunilius and consuming the last 5 books of the Iliad at a stretch, walking over the hills at Malvern, in the train between London and Bangor. He read the lives of the emperors, 1849 in brackets, from the Maximin to Carnus, inclusive in the Augustan history. And on another occasion he was so greatly amused and moved that he was at last forced to turn into a bypath, lest the parties of walkers should see him blubbering for imagery, or for rather imaginary things, the creations of a ballad maker who had been dead 2,700 years. Yet not in the country alone does he walk and read. Such feats are common enough even to ordinary bookmen. He could thread the crowded streets of London with his eyes fixed upon a book, walking as fast as other people walked and reading a good deal faster than anybody else could read. He is eminent even among these peripatetic readers who, by instinct or long practice, I know not which, have acquired a sense of direction in which the eye plays but a secondary part, as Thomas Ballard, the painter friend of Samuel Butler, who was always reading in the streets and by long practice steering in and out among the passengers on the pavement in a most skilful manner, and that Unitarian minister observed by Charles Lamb walking down Snow Hill, reading Lardner so skillfully that it is a wonder how he sidled along, keeping clear of secular contacts. Shelley was no less absorbed by the volume that was open before him, in Cheapside, in Cranbourne Alley, or in Bond Street, than in a lonely lane or in a secluded library. And to show that this curious and useful gift is yet existent, there are many Londoners who remember having seen Dr. Furnivall on fine days, quietly walking along bareheaded, reading a book in the bustle of Oxford Street. Thomas Frognall Dibdin delighted to stroll about Camden Hill in company, one day with Erasmus, Scaliger, Casaubon, and Leucippus, another with a volume of Old English divinity, scoring the more striking passages to be afterwards inserted in a commonplace book. Again, he mentioned sitting on a grass hillcock in the green fields of North End, contiguous to Gloucester Lodge, with a volume of Balliet in one hand and a Shellhorn in the other, and Spizelius, Bower, and De Burgh close by, with Johnson and Boswell. He used to sit, hour after hour and day after day, in the groves and gardens of Oxford during his college days, and when seeking respite from the labour of compiling his Bibliotheca Spenseriana, he went down to Ramsgate, that most interesting of all watering places, he says, where under a blue and serene sky he strolled abroad now with Pope, now with Dryden, and now with Milton. Mark Rutherford, another peripatetic bookman, wandered about London streets at 6 o'clock in the morning reading Tennyson's Maud. Leigh Hunt never walked without a book, regarding nature chiefly as a reading room out of doors, a place to lie down in, under a tree or a haystack, for the better enjoyment of a book. For he knew, as Petrarch before him, that to carry books into the fields was good, for silence suits them better than the noise of cities, as John Wilson, a London bookseller, has it. Oh, for a book in a shady nook, either in a door or out, with the green leaves whispering overhead, or the street cries all about, where I may read all at my ease, both of the new and old, for a jolly good book whereon to look is better to me than gold. On our footnote, let's see what number footnote. We don't have a footnote there, so we're not getting the name of the poem, I don't think. Yeah, all right then. The name of the poem does not seem to be included in the footnote here. There is no footnote for that bit of poetry. This sentiment hath many exponents, says Richard Hooker, that notable prelate of our church, who, when vicar of Drayton Beauchamp in Buckinghamshire was discovered, Isaac Walton records by two of his pupils reading Horace while he tended his small allotment of sheep in a common field, for that his servant had gone home to dine and assist his wife to do some necessary household business. Benjamin Robert Hayden retired to the windmill beyond Kilburn, where he lounged on the grass reading Alan Cunningham's Lives of the Painters. Keats would read and loaf on Hampstead Heath with a friend, as John Hamilton Reynolds, whom he invites to go with him and enjoy his black-letter Chaucer of 1596. Then I went indoors, brought out a loaf, half a cheese, and a bottle of Chablis, lay on the grass, and forgot the oaf over a jolly chapter of Rabelais. And a footnote pointing us to Browning's poem from Dramatic Romances and Lyrics. In his youthful days, Edmund Gosse made a reading place of the turfed hillcock at the root of an elm in his father's garden. This, he says, was long my summer reading desk, for I could lie stretched on the lawn with my head and shoulders supported by the elm tree hillock and the book in a fissure of the rough turf. Henry Crabb Robinson walked Clampton, reading Colonel Jack. Macaulay roamed the Pontine marshes with Bulwer's Alice, and more affected by it than by any novel these many years. When he visited Angiers in 1843, he enjoyed the scenery and a book, and was sorry when a Frenchman engaged him in talk. Edward Fitzgerald sauntered in the fields with the anthology of Stobæus. Felicia Dorothea Hermans, as a young girl, would take her Shakespeare up into the branches of an apple tree in the orchard of her Welsh home near Abergele, and there steady him in shade and quietness, which is a habit much cultivated by young girls, and I may cite a more recent instance in that of Lady Lungard, who, in her young days, found studious seclusion perched in the branches of a tree, where she remembered reading Carlyle's French Revolution, which made her a Democrat. Dorothy Wordsworth read Henry V in the orchard at Grasmere, while William lay on the seat, and William Wordsworth read to her his poems, Peter Bell and Joanna, on the roadside beside the Rothay. In the prelude, he tells how as a young man he would go out for a day's fishing, but lay reading all day. Though a soft west wind ruffled the waters to the angler's wish, for a whole day together have I lain down by thy side, O Derwent, murmuring stream, on the hot stones and in the glaring sun, and there have read, devouring as I read, defrauding the day's glory, desperate. William Corey read straight through Jane Eyre on the black, gnarled Reeth Rock, abroad when there was a lowering storm cloud and a sunset on a distant sail, and a hollow roar in the reefs, and the reading broken off by a queer rattle of shingle, which turned out to be a sheep fallen from a cliff. George Moore read the dazzling stanzas of Shelley by the shores of a pale green Irish lake. Lionel Johnson at Winchester refused to work on his studies when the heat was visible and tangible, burning away to the heart of the world, preferring Lucretius or Hugo in the sunshine. Newman Flower, the biographer of Handel, remembers reading The Trumpet Major, sitting on a bank in Hardy's own shire of Dorset, whilst waiting for an idle ferret to disturb a dilatory rabbit, and when he later came to London, he finished all Hardy's books sitting under a gas lamp after office hours on the embankment. It is recorded that David Blondel, a Protestant minister in the 17th century, would lie on the ground with the books he required for his studies all around him. Isaac Disraeli tells of the biographer of Cujas, who would also lie, studying prostrate on a carpet. And one of Macaulay's earliest memories is of lying on the hearthrug, eating bread and butter, and reading a book. At least two others of our statesmen have indulged a similar reading habit in their boyhood. Mr. Gladstone read Ivanhoe when he was 9 years old. I devoured it, he said, lying on my stomach on the hearthrug. And Mr. Stanley Baldwin confessed in a discourse to the English Association that as a small boy he read Scott's novels in the same manner. Prothero gives out that, when a child, the floor was Henry Bradshaw's favourite place of study, and once a friend found the infant bibliographer lying under the table with a sheet of the Times open before him, by the aid of which he was learning to read. Francis Thompson could read anywhere. The noisier the environment, the more absorbed he became. He found seclusion in the street, the marketplace, the tavern. Already as a boy, says Everard Meynell, seeking the highway and the highway's seclusion, he would carry his book to the stairs, away from the constraint of the chairs and tables and the unemotional flatness of the floor. Thomas Gray wished to be always lying on sofas, reading eternal new novels of Sibyllin and Mavro and so on. Dominie Sampson, Walter Scott tells us, often opened a volume when halfway up the library steps, fell upon some interesting passage, and without shifting his inconvenient posture, continued, immersed in the fascinating perusal, until the servant pulled him by the skirts to assure him that dinner waited. Mark Pattison records how his father, when at Oxford, was caught one night by his tutor, Hodson, reading his favourite Aristophanes on the back of Cain and Abel, and when asked what he did there, replied, and we have a line, it looks like written out in Greek here. We do have the translation in the footnote. So he replied, "I tread the air and speculate on the sun." Shelley delighted to read, sitting naked on the rocks at the Bagni de Lucca before bathing. My custom, he tells Peacock, is to undress and sit on the rocks, reading Herodotus, until the perspiration has subsided, and then to leap from the edge of the rock into this fountain, a practice in the hot weather excessively refreshing. Robert Burns pored over a select collection of English songs, which was his Vade Missum, whilst driving his cart or walking to work, song by song, verse by verse, carefully noting the true, tender, or sublime from affection and fustian, and he is convinced that he owes to this practice much of his critic craft, such as it is. So also his compatriot of a later time, Robert Louis Stevenson, roamed the country with a notebook in one pocket and a reading book in the other, playing the sedulous ape, as he admits to his masters. And I have it on the evidence of Malcolm Macmillan that when he was in Athens, he met a learned German who, he was credibly informed by a very amusing lady, was supposed to have a Homer printed on India rubber to read during his bath. But I grow troublesome. Let this discourse have what ends it can. The use I make of these instances is but to pretend a reason for my belief that readers can read anywhere, and to entitle you to believe that I have proved to mine own satisfaction by personal experience, but could not prove to you but by these examples. And that brings us to the end of that particular section on various reading places. We're on page 247. Our next section will be books on battlefields, but let's linger for a moment on this topic of, reading anywhere, anyway, reading anyway and anywhere. I've certainly read in many places over the course of my reading life. Some notable ones growing up, of course, lounging in the childhood bedroom on a summer lounge chair under the trees in my parents' backyard, in parks, on trains, buses, and of course on the verandas and patios of coffee shops and restaurants when the weather is good. But we're moving into the winter weather here. It is now November and it will snow any day, and so for the time being, I will not be doing any out-of-doors reading. Most of my reading is going to take place within the confines of this apartment, but we'll end it at that for today.